Hey everyone, it's Marianne from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. I want to start going through the Henry Garrido letter that went out yesterday to all of the delegates. That letter has circulated far and wide as people were very, very angry over it. So I want to start to go through it a little bit at a time because it is a lot to digest. A lot of it is not factual, unfortunately, but we're hoping to be able to sort through it. So as typically we do in these situations, we debunk bullshit. And as you can see, the top of this screen, it absolutely says the New York City retirees are debunking DC37 bullshit. And that's exactly what this letter is. We highlighted the lies in yellow and we fact checked them in red, just like a good teacher would. So let's get into this. The first block of yellow is first some background, he says. As you have heard me mention before, the Health Benefits Stabilization Fund, it's actually called the Health Insurance Stabilization Fund, was created by the city of New York back in the early 80s. It was actually 1983. As a way to keep the cost of healthcare stable. No, it had nothing to do with keeping it stable. The Health Insurance Stabilization Fund had one purpose and one purpose only. It was to pay a premium difference in times when the premium difference between HIP, which is the benchmark, and your GHI plan. That's it. Later on, the terminology changed that if there was extra money or excess monies available, that the unions could use that stabilization fund to create a benefit as long as there was cash in it. But the one purpose that the stabilization fund had was to pay the premium difference, if there was one, between the HIP HMO benchmark and GHI. So like you'll always see me do this. You'll say, if the HIP rate was higher than the GHI rate, the difference in that premium, HIP was higher than GHI, the difference goes into the fund and now you're adding up money. But in the years where GHI was higher than the HIP rate, then money would have to come out of the fund to equalize the two premiums. What is the HIP rate? The HIP rate is what the statute, the law that the unions broke and the city broke. This is why we keep suing them. The HIP rate is what the city has to pay up to. So no matter what the cost of that plan is, if the HIP plan is $1,000 or the HIP plan is $2,000 or the HIP plan is $5,000. That's the benchmark that the city has to pay up to. You never want to mess with that, right? Because that's the benchmark. And as that goes up with inflation, that's what the city has to pay up to. That's your ceiling. If you have a plan that's higher than this, you would be paying premium. This is what the stabilization fund was for. In these times when the plan you want, like GHI CBP, if it's higher than the HIP rate, you pay the difference. This is where the stabilization fund comes in and equalizes it for you so that you don't pay the difference. What does premium look like for you today versus the HIP plan and the GHI plan for you active workers? Let me tell you. For an individual, it's about $15 or $17 a month. And for a family plan, it's about $200 a month. That's what premium looks like. So that would be the difference. If you look at the COBRA sheets, you have the rate sheets on the OLR website. That would tell you what all the insurance plans are available and what their rates are. You look at the HIP rate and you look at the GHI rate. You'll see that they're slightly different. The HIP rate is only about $15, $17 less than the GHI plan. And that would then result in a premium. But since the stabilization fund was there to pay the premium, you didn't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, the Municipal Labor Committee, headed by Henry Garrido and Michael Mulgrew, Harry Nispoli, suppressed the HIP rate. And they did that starting in 2016 to save the city money. And if you look at the memos on OLR's website, it specifically says that one of the savings goals that they did to save money was to suppress the HIP rate by saddling the people in the HIP plan with copays. So that was then suppressing what the city had to pay for everybody, employees, retirees, and their dependents. And then now that would take more money out of the stabilization fund. So if the HIP rate is about, I don't know, let's just say $1,000, and you suppressed it to a value of $950, then every time your plans are now, your new benchmark is $950. If your other plan is $1,000, that extra $50 is coming out of the stabilization fund. Why would you do that? It was going to cause the demise or the downward spiral of the stabilization fund even faster than it was already going. So when we start talking about why are you causing yourselves pain, you're trying to meet some savings benchmark, and yet you're double paying. You had to give something up for this stabilization fund, and then you're paying out of your own pocket. This absolutely made no sense why you would do this. But it goes back to 2014, where the United Federation of Teachers negotiated a 9-year contract after not having one under Bloomberg, negotiated this contract under de Blasio. The contract was negotiated with Bob Lynn, the former commissioner of labor relations, and Stan Brezhnev, who used to work for the city of New York, and I guess works for him as a consultant in some capacity, because Bob Lynn has an outside consulting company that he gave himself while still a commissioner, according to the newspapers, a job as an independent contractor working for the city of New York, doing negotiations for labor. That this was the very first year ever that I can recall that a union negotiated a contract that was partially funded on the backs of other unions and retirees. And how did they do that? That was the provision that said the teachers' contract was predicated upon $1 billion being given from the stabilization fund to the city to offset that years of collective bargaining for raises for the teachers and other bargaining costs in 2014. I have never seen a union contract for any unit, any union, any local that had to be funded with the permission of other unions. And that's how they did it. And what they also did was, in order to get the other unions to go along, gave them money from the stabilization fund for their welfare funds. You'll see that mentioned here as we get a little bit lower. That 165 came from the MLC agreements. So if we continue through this, it says the fund covers healthcare costs for active city workers, retirees, and their dependents. The Health Insurance Stabilization Fund does not pay for a Medicare eligible retiree. I don't care who keeps saying it, it is not true. The Health Insurance Stabilization Fund pays for premium difference for an active worker and an under 65 retiree. Hard stop. Medicare eligible retirees, our plans only pay 20% of our health care. They will never need to be covered, premium, never need to be covered by the stabilization fund. The fund, it also pays for PICA, which provides life-saving prescription drugs, cancer treatment, diabetes management, and mental health. That's another benefit Medicare eligible retirees do not benefit from either. So you're being misled once again. As healthcare costs and prescription drug prices have soared over the last decade and claims are much higher than the rate of available plans, the stabilization fund reached a deficit at the end of fiscal year 2022 with additional recurring losses of $100 million a month. He never mentions that they misused the money. He never mentions that the fund had over $3 billion in it, that by the Municipal Labor Committee agreeing, Henry and Michael, Harry Nespoli, agreeing to healthcare savings in 2014, and they were recurring savings that they did in 14 and then did it again in 18, that this is what caused this problem. It was really, I think, the end goal of Bob Lynn and Stan Brezhnev, because they have always wanted to make sure that labor paid for healthcare. We'll get into those agreements a little bit more at another video, but let's just finish these two paragraphs. It says the shortfall prompted the city to reduce its previously negotiated contribution to the fund by $165 a member and retiree effective October 2022. So the $165 came from the MLC agreements, and it was only if there was money available that was as a result of savings, right? So I want to show you those two healthcare agreements so that you could see exactly what I'm seeing, because it'll make a lot more sense when you could actually see what they agreed to, not just hear me talk about it. This agreement is the 2014 agreement. Let me scroll up so you could see. It is the Bob Lynn, OLR, Harry Nespoli, May 5th of 2014. Unless otherwise agreed to by the parties, the welfare fund contribution will remain constant for the length of the successor unit agreements. Those are really all expired at this point. This was 2014, including the $65 funded from the stabilization fund pursuant to the 2005 health benefit agreement between the city and the MLC. So those unit agreements are over. And unless that was extended, which it was in this, but if there's no money in the fund, they really should have said, hey, you know what, we should stop collecting that $65 a year per member and retiree to kind of conserve the money in the fund so that it pays health insurance. Because what the heck good is it to finance your welfare funds if you don't have health care, right? Then the next agreement is 18 agreement. Scroll up so you can see it. June 28th, 18, from Labor Relations to Harry Nispoli. Okay. After the conclusion of fiscal year 2021, the party shall calculate the savings realized during the 3-year period after the conclusion of fiscal year 21. In the event the MLC generated more than $600 million in recurring healthcare savings as agreed upon by the city and the MLC's actuaries, such additional savings shall be utilized as follows. The first $68 million will be used by the city to make a $100 per member per year increase to the welfare funds, active and retired, effective July 1 of 2021. If a savings amount of over $600 million, but less than $668 million is achieved, the $100 per member per year would be prorated. Any savings thereafter shall be split equally between the city and the MLC and applied in a manner agreed to by the parties. Now, if you're starting to see that balance dip, don't you think that the prudent thing would be to stop taking the money out of the fund to preserve it to pay healthcare premium? That way you could at least see your doctor and come up with another alternate funding mechanism of being able to pay money into your stabilization fund, because all of the unions already negotiate money in their separate unit contracts for that welfare funds. They didn't need to take out more in this. That was just pure greed. So I'm going to end this here. Otherwise, this will go too long. And then we'll just keep going through this letter. But right now, those are the first 2 paragraphs. And it explains to you how the stabilization fund was misused, what exactly it's used for. That would coincide with the other video that I did yesterday that talks about the stabilization fund and what its purpose is. And this also explained to you exactly what its purpose is in equalizing the rates between the 2 premiums so that you always have 2 free plans at a minimum, especially now when costs are coming higher. One of the worst things that they did was suppress the HIP rate, because that reduced the ceiling that the city had to pay up to. So they pretty much put themselves in this financial pickle. It's not the retirees. And again, the unions and the Municipal Labor Committee, nor the Stabilization Fund pays for a Medicare eligible retirees healthcare premium. Hard stop. Nowhere. Never, ever did. Not for the decades. So, and before then it was the city paying it, not the unions. So sorry, guys, you're being lied to and gaslit, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Call them out on those lies, because this is your healthcare. And I'm going to say it again as well. We told you they came after us. We told you 2 years ago, they're coming after us. We told you last year, they're coming after us. And now they're coming after you when they published that RFI and RFP. And then now they're trying to say in this letter, there's little nuances that they're blaming that if you have to pay premium, it's because of the retirees. No, it's because of their mismanagement of union money and city money, not the retirees. Medicare eligible retirees is the least expensive population for the city to pay for. And the only thing that the union ever pays for a Medicare person is if they are in a union and if they have a welfare fund. It pays for vision, prescription, and dental. Or if you're like the teachers union, it really only pays for vision and dental. They do give a subsidy back to the members that pay for the prescription plan, but other unions, they provide a free drug plan to their retirees. So that's it, folks. At least we'll be back again on this memo, because there's 2.5 more pages to go through. Have a great day.